We have two titans of the football broadcasting world in John Brewin and Jonathan Wilson. How are we getting on, fellas?
Thank you. How are you?
Yeah, well, it's deadline day. Now, we can't talk too much about transfers because it's changing hour by hour. There's last minute inquiries happening, desperate scrambles, there's public declarations yesterday. Players are staying, other players are sitting out in a huff. Loan deals, swaps are talking about. Like, they never come through, but everybody loves a good part exchange idea. One team's dead wood, another team's last chance. Big players on the move. Emmy Martinez driving around Europe, pleading with anyone to take him. Records being broken. Jonathan, we have our deadline day back.
I'm not really sure why this has suddenly happened, but it's felt like quite a lively summer anyway. Yeah, there's the great carousel of centre forwards, I guess, was sort of the main strand, which reached its climax, about 1:30 this morning when the Alexander Isak deal was finally agreed. But I don't know. I guess there's just a lot of liquidity in the market, and maybe it's just the power of the Premier League that maybe if we were doing this in, looking at La Liga or looking at Serie A or looking at the Bundesliga, we'd be saying, "Oh, it's another drab window." But there's so much money in the Premier League, and I think because last season so many of the elite sides struggled a bit, and there was that sense of, I mean, I know the highest place was probably Nottingham Forest finishing seventh, but there's a sense of the middle class having a good season last season. And history tends to suggest that when that happens, the elite hit back by spending an enormous amount of money the next summer.
Jonathan's touched on it there about Isaac happening at 1:30 this morning.
Yeah.
Why did this happen so late? We all knew this was going to happen. Why is it only happening now in the last day?
I wouldn't be able to tell you that, but yeah, I mean, I suppose we always thought that Isaac deal would be done at 5 to 7. That would be the normal way of doing it, and yeah, and that's the way it would have done in the traditional deadline day that we forget, that we always think of. It actually hasn't happened, as Jonathan said, for about 10, 15 years. You think of the visible disappointment on Sky Sport News presenters as they're supposed to get excited about, I don't know, Nicky Shorey's move to Darlington or something like that. But it's not. This time, the big deals are happening. And I think probably a lot of the stuff that's happening is to do with maybe PSR, because clubs are trying to work out where they're going to be set at the end of this window. That calculations are much more difficult now rather than just spend and worry about it later. And there's a trickle-down effect, obviously, of the Isak deal, because instantly Wissa is suddenly going to Newcastle for 55 million, when originally Newcastle had bid 25 million. So that's where the money starts flowing. And then, as you mentioned, there's some flotsam and jetsam around. There's a few players around that are, Chelsea have at least 3 in Raheem Sterling, Ben Chilwell, Axel Disasi, I've added to that list. And then you've got the desperate clubs that haven't done any business. When I was at Fulham last week, Marco Silva's saying, we haven't bought anyone. We need to add 2 players. Well, he said the same on Saturday. He'd have to wait another 6 days. So there's panic setting in at Fulham. There's panic setting in at West Ham, at Aston Villa. And even the bigger clubs, Liverpool are still doing deals. Manchester United are still doing deals. City are doing deals. Donnarumma is arriving on the final day of the transfer window. All happening.
Yeah, Jonathan, I know you were at the City game. They seemed, I think, very comfortable in their own skin that they had done business early. And then season hasn't started too well. And now they're back in deadline day as well.
Yeah, and that game yesterday was a very strange game because they looked totally in control after an hour. Then Fabian Herzog, the Brighton manager, makes 4 substitutions on the hour, and the game changes in an instant. I mean, somehow bringing on James Milner for Carlos Baleba made them more dynamic. I don't really understand how that works. Herzog was asked about it afterwards, and he was sort of saying, "Oh, yeah, sometimes I just get a feeling inside." Well, okay, well,
that's great.
It worked there, but the thing with City is you look at them, and there's question marks throughout the team, and they keep getting done with that same ball in behind the defensive line, and you sort of think, well, Rodri will sort that out. And Rodri made his first start in a league game yesterday since he got the injury last October, but he's obviously taking time to get up to speed. That last half hour, City got done by that ball over and over again. We saw Tottenham get their first goal from a similar pass the previous week. We saw Wolves cause problems in that first 15 minutes, even although City went on to win that game quite easily. Al Hilal caused some problems with that in the Club World Cup. That's how Palace got the goal in the cup final. That's an ongoing problem. And I guess there's sort of two related issues there. So one is the defensive line is pushing very high. Now, City have always played quite a high line since Guardiola's been there. Maybe it's slightly higher since Pep Linders came in, and that's very much his style of play. But if you're going to play with a line that high, your press has to be absolutely on the money. And maybe that isn't quite happening yet. And maybe that will come. It does take time. But then watching on Sunday, I was thinking, is it actually the problem James Trafford? That we saw his issues with passing out against Spurs, but maybe he's just slightly too deep in a starting position than he needs to be for a line playing that high. And that's why there's that apparently all that space there. Whereas previously you had Ederson coming out, mopping up in that space. I'm not saying James Trafford is a bad goalkeeper by any means. I saw a lot of him at Burnley at 22. He's a really, really good goalkeeper, but maybe he's not quite the right goalkeeper for City.
That's why they're going in there for one of the best goalkeepers about just in the last day. Just a feeling in Pep Guardiola's stomach. We need to get Donnarumma into the team. Just before we move off the transfer stuff, John, I see there's industry wars happening now as well. I mean, there's a lot of journalists arguing online about whether it's 125 million or it's 130 million, and our sides, fans of both clubs, are rallying in behind this thing. Why is this so important to people? It's a record anyway, isn't it?
It's funny, I mean, certain fans treat it as if it's their own money, don't they? Yeah, that's the way that it operates, and we'll find out in the club accounts, which were files, 18 months hence or whatever, and we'll see where whether it was. But I mean, there was that odd spat, wasn't there, over two people that really should know better. Luke Edwards is, a fine reporter, has had a interesting summer dealing with that Isak deal, and I think what Luke's been through there, a few reporters would tell you has happened over. I mean, I go back actually to one quite a while ago, but Gareth Bale to Real Madrid from Tottenham, that went to the last day of the transfer window, and the poor chaps had to report on that story almost daily. You're looking for an angle to change it to something, and then the thing is, we always know that the deal is going to get done because the money will be right at the end of it. And that was what was always going to happen, because once Liverpool go in for the player, once the player decides he wants to leave for Liverpool, there was the part of the Newcastle statement that some people read to say, that's it, no deal, where they said, if conditions are met, what are the conditions? The conditions are always the money, right? Once the money's put on the table, Newcastle have to take that. They just bought a player from 75 million from Germany. They're in for Wissa. Add the sums together, you've got nearly 130 million. Well, there you go. Goodbye, Alexander Isak. On to the next season.
Was it 125 or 130, John?
Well, listen, I'm not well sourced enough to say that. I could never claim that. And some people claim they are well sourced. Some others are not. And we suspect some are, some aren't. But 130. Well, again, the Newcastle 150 was the price that we expected, and didn't seem that outlandish, despite it being outlandish. Yeah, they've accepted 130.
Yeah, but I mean, John, it's not coincidence, is it, that Newcastle said 150, Liverpool's first bid is 110. Oh, they've let in the middle. Who could possibly have predicted that?
Well, yes, I mean, it's funny, isn't it? The art of the deal, as someone very famous called it. Yeah, that's how it's done. Amazing.
So Liverpool have strengthened considerably. They beat Arsenal as well, so they're really starting well to this season. This is the sort of game where coaching is good until it's not, until it's over coaching. Like intelligent players are great until they're too self-aware. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar in Ireland in Gaelic games. We've had this problem up until last year where the game became unwatchable. And it was because coaches got a hold of it and they figured out how to very simply and effectively stop teams from scoring. And then they realised we can keep the ball for as long as we want here. And the only thing that stopped that happening was this winter, where they just drastic rule changes right up to formational changes where people have to keep players in a certain area of the pitch. Now, I'm not saying, Jonathan, that we need to implement drastic rule changes in the football. I love football, but it is just something we need to keep an eye on. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I think this is a bit of a reversion to what big games were like sort of 15 years ago. I think the Klopp Guardiola free flowing 4-3s, 5-1s, yeah, they were the aberration. I think football at the very highest level is moving into a slightly more attritional phase. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think actually the biggest games should be quite hard to watch. I think that's better. People are having far too much fun, and we should stamp down on it now. But the good football should be earned. It shouldn't just be given to you. And the fact that I think Arteta is a particularly cautious coach, I think is interesting. It adds a new strand, a new dimension, or reinsert an old dimension into games between the top sides. In that game, the total XG was 0.9. It was 0.5 to Liverpool, 0.4 to Arsenal. It might even have been the other way around. I can't remember. And the second lowest this season is 1.7. Sunderland's 3-0 win over West Ham.
Wow.
So that's by a factor of almost 2 the worst game of football this season, if what you're looking for is chances on goal. But it was never less than engrossing. And we end up with an absolutely brilliant winner that will be remembered for a long, long time.
John, are you like me? Are you a simpleton like me who's just looking for goals and goal my faction?
I'm very much a simpleton. Yeah, I mean, Jonathan's correct in the fact that in an era before you had to win the title with 95 points or whatever or plus. Sir Alex Ferguson, Arsene Wenger even would be quite happy to go draw away at your big rivals, go home, and it's done. Interesting what you say about the positional thing. What changes could be made? The amount of time Arsenal take over free kicks and corners, that is a delay of the game, and that's you sort of almost becoming this NFL type of thing where everything's planned out. And the funny thing is, they spend all this time over free kicks and corners and lose to a free kick. The irony there. Arteta is trying to do it a different way, a way that I actually thought could win them the title. But you do wonder about his how he plans for these games, because I remember Arsenal. I think it's 3 seasons ago. They go to Liverpool, who were not a title rival at the time. City were the title rival of Arsenal. They play them off the park for the first half or so. And then there's a tackle comes in from Trent Alexander-Arnold that just lifts up. I think it was on Granit Xhaka, lifts up the stadium, and suddenly Liverpool come back into the game. It's a draw. Now it's a decent result, but it feels to me that from that moment in bigger games, Mikel Arteta's got frightened of these big games. Frit, as our former Prime Minister Boris Johnson would put it, and he's not. It's sort of, and since then, Arsenal played very exciting football at that time, and obviously they suffered a lot of injuries. They still suffer a lot of injuries, but they seem to have rolled into a ball, made themselves strong, full of big grippers in midfield and defence, and a bit less artistry up front. But that game was almost there for the taking. Madueke had the beating of Kirkez. If they'd have just pushed it a little bit more, Liverpool's vulnerabilities have been laid out this season. And yet we had a game that descended into a level, not quite of the old firm levels. I mean, I don't know if you saw the XG from that was the lowest that had ever been calculated or something like that.
Yeah, 0.33, I think, total, yeah.
Yeah, the lowest ever calculated or something like that. So it wasn't quite that bad. But it's still not much of a spectacle for this blue ribbon, massive game. And the thing that I agree. Is football an entertainment franchise or is it a results business? That's the balance you've got to strike. And I think we know which side on it of that Mikel Arteta comes down on.
Yeah, and just before we move off you, John, you said Liverpool's vulnerabilities are laid out for everyone to see. What are those?
Well, I think, obviously, it's a team in transition because of being brought in so many players. I think Florian Wirtz still has to find his way into that team in to be as dominant a player as we've expected him to be. Koikes is that left back that probably isn't as defensively solid as Andy Robertson was all over those years. They've got a problem at right back in at the player they bought to replace Trent Alexander-Arnold. I mean, it's obviously he's played very well there, but that's not a long-term option. And it's just a question of turning the dial on the team towards attack. Means by nature, you're going to suffer in defence and protecting your defence. Also, it feels like at times Virgil van Dijk not getting any younger, is a one-man defence. Konate leaves the field with an injury. That's a problem position for them. Maybe one they'll sort out in the transfer window. We expect the Gueye deal, to reach its resolution, don't we? Let's put it that way.
Yeah. It's an interesting one, isn't it, Jonathan? It feels like every result like this now for Arsenal, and this could happen for the next 3 years if Arteta's still in charge, but it feels like every time they don't win or they don't capitalise when a team's there for the taking, it's going to be held up against Arteta and his style or his approach anyway.
Yeah, I think understandably so. I mean, if yesterday had been a one-off, given they went into that game, Odegaard couldn't start, no Havertz, no Saka, lose Saliba early on, fair enough. They're 4 injuries. It's going to unsettle you. That's natural. It's understandable. The problem is twofold. So the first is that the players they bring in, Madueke comes in on the right. We saw last season when he played for Chelsea against Bournemouth, when Kirkus was playing well, and Kirkus is not playing well at the minute, he had the beating of Kirkus. A game at Stamford Bridge especially, he played really well against him. Player coming in midfield for Odegaard is Mikel Merino, who is in the Spain side that wins the Euros. He's a very, very good player. He was a good player for Arsenal last season. So the problem is that by appearing so cautious, by appearing frit, to use John's word, I can't believe he's making me quote 2 Tory prime ministers. It's almost expressing a lack of faith in those players. And yeah, Madueke cost £45 million. Marino cost 30 million. So that is troubling. It's concerning. But I think you also have to put it in the context of previous games. And you think back to the season before last, when Arsenal had a lead in the Championship and they went to the Etihad and they were level with City and they were on top with about 20 minutes to go and they shut up shop and took the draw. And had they pressed on then, it was a game where you just felt the momentum was with them. And you think a really bold manager, that was an opportunity to really seize the opportunity, put clear water between you and City. Yeah, Arsenal from then on, it's not that they bottle the title race, which they were accused of doing. I think they only dropped points against Villa.
Yeah.
But the point is that they'd given themselves the opportunity of dropping points in a game if they'd won that one. And the point is, they were on top. It was as if the capacity to sniff momentum of a game, which I think is an art of management that is a little bit overlooked these days, that he doesn't have that. And he sort of went back in some sort of pre-programmed thing of a draw's fine. And I think with Liverpool yesterday, yeah, they let in 6 goals in the 3 games so far, if you include the Community Shield. We know that Kirk has had problems. We know Konate's had problems this season. We know the balance of that midfield isn't right. If you went at them the first 20 minutes and really put doubts in their heads, what's going to happen? They could have folded. As it was, almost nothing happens in the first half. The second half, they pretty much let Liverpool have the ball. Liverpool have 70% of the ball in the second half. And okay, it's a freakishly brilliant goal that beats them. But if you give a team full of freakishly brilliant players 70% of the ball, there is a chance they are going to do that. I understand yesterday they were without several players, but it feels like the latest in a long line of these opportunities missed, opportunities not seized.
An absolute peach of a goal, a free kick from Szoboszlai. John, are you on Twitter as much as I am? Because again, there's an argument on there whether or not the wall was right, whether or not David Raya's positioning was right. I mean, he moves very early to get across. I don't know. It's 30 yards out. Maybe the wall could be different, but I feel like we're splitting hairs for such a great goal. It hits off the post and goes in.
Oh, it's a beauty, wasn't it? I mean, he couldn't have hit it better. I saw Joe Hart mount a goalkeepers union defence of it, and fair enough. I think Joe Hart's actually very good at analysis of goalkeeping. I wouldn't dismiss it. You have to go somewhere to go to dive across. That wasn't the reason Arsenal are disappointed with that game, really. But obviously it's the goal. But the reason they're disappointed is the team didn't play well enough to win the game, and a title race in which they've dropped behind their rivals for the title in the title race. That's the issue, isn't it? And so people look for blame. People look for excuses. As this idea that it's always the narrative about Arsenal. You don't say this about other teams and whatever. they will be very disappointed about that result, and rightly so, because it's a game that was within their grasp. And Jonathan's correct; they were missing players with injuries, but that's what they've spent the last 2 summers. Their squad's packed with talent, even if they are missing players. They've got players to come in. It's a good squad. You'd say it's possibly the strongest in the league, give or take Liverpool's. They had a chance to do something there, and for whatever reason, conservatism, the manager, it didn't happen, didn't come off.
Well, one team who took their chance, one team who got redemption was Manchester United at Old Trafford. And they bounced back from that Grimsby defeat. And John, the celebration police are out in force because Bruno, Dalot, maybe giving it a bit too much is what they're being accused of afterwards, after beating Burnley 3-2. I would say in United's defence, they deserved to win that match and probably should have won it by more. But again, that's almost an indictment on them as well, that they were in this slog fight and needed a penalty in the end to get over the line.
I mean, the celebration release. I mean, whatever happened to enjoying your wins? I mean, Alex Ferguson enjoyed the wins until it was time to get on with the next job. I mean, you 5 minutes, enjoy yourself. Let's get on with the next one. It's 3-2. They're a team that have been smashed all over the show, across social media, across the old media, wherever. They lost to Grimsby. It was a shocking result. It's the worst probably in the club's history. They beat a fellow Premier League team. Okay, it's Burnley. But the thing is, in that first half, they played really well. And you saw Scott Parker say, I don't know what you're all on about. This team were playing really well. And, obviously there's some element of him trying to sell himself, as all managers do, but it felt like those at the game of colleagues of ours were saying, "Yeah, this is good, this is better," and then United, do what United do or have done for so many years now, is fall apart. But it's not quite a Mark Robbins the City ground moment, of course not. But it's better. They're above City in the league. Enjoy your wins. There's small crumbs of comfort that are available. They're getting a goalkeeper today. Things might improve. Amorim, the problem is that Amorim contributes to the psychodrama, doesn't he? Because he said afterwards that, clearly he's asked the question, I love my players now, when he said that he sometimes hates them. He sometimes gives these lines away to us in the press, doesn't he? I think we'll miss him when he's not around, because he's good value. He's good value.
Yeah, Jonathan, John's right. I mean, Bender and Onana have been a problem this season as well for them. Mbeumo's up and running. He's gotten a goal. Bruno Fernandes has taken the penalty and sort of put that right for himself as well. Yeah, it's their first win. They're on the road now. Do you subscribe to Scott Parker's logic that United are better than the results have suggested?
No. I mean, there's two slightly separate issues there, right? So there's the basic flow of play argument. So I was at that game against Arsenal on the opening weekend. I was bewildered by how many people said they thought they played quite well that game. I thought it was, it was like a lower mid-table team, which I guess United were last season, who put up a plucky fight against a top side who, to be honest, weren't playing particularly well themselves. I mean, okay, there was the Dorgu chance that they hit the post. There's that one very good Raya save from Cunha from a narrow angle. I know Raya made 7 saves in the game. The other 6 were pretty straightforward. The saves you expect him to make. My issue with it was there was very little cohesion there. There were some individuals doing good things, but yeah, if you spent 200 million quid on strikers or on forwards in the window, you'd hope we do some stuff. And I haven't really seen any sign of that cohesion yet. And the fact that Cunha is now injured, that's not going to come anytime soon. So that's still an issue. I'm not at all convinced by Bruno Fernandes at the back of midfield, particularly without somebody incredibly dynamic alongside him, which United don't appear to have in the squad. Amad Diallo, I think, is a wonderful footballer. He's got great feet. The amount of power he can get in that left foot with minimal backlift is extraordinary. Is he a wing back? I'm not sure. So look, yeah, they've beaten Burnley. Great. It's a win they had to get, because if they hadn't, I think that really would have been it for Amorim. But it's only Burnley, and United don't judge themselves by victories over Burnley. They've got City up next. That's a much bigger test, and we'll see after that. And yeah, they've got quite a hard run coming up. So I don't think they're out of the woods yet by any means. But it is 3 points, and sometimes just getting 3 points is especially going into an international break. If they'd gone into the international break, having dropped points at home against Burnley, and you'd have had 2 weeks of the likes of us having a bit of a laugh, that would have been unconscionable for them.
I can't let you go, Jonathan, without asking what's happening up in the Stadium of Light, because it's electric up there. Like, it's one of those ones. If you are watching Match of the Day still, like, it's joyous watching the games from there now at the minute. And I know there's been 2 wins, obviously, which helps, but I mean, they're making crossing great again in Sunderland as well. I mean, this is just a joy to watch, and it's like a throwback as well, almost.
I said they're a physically very big team now. Yeah, it's the thing with the signings this summer. It's not just they brought players in, which I think any promoted side has to. It's been very targeted, very focused. Although they're still doing a lot of business today, there's just names being spewed out constantly. But Bobry seems to have completed his move from Ajax. They're after a Dutch defender as well. Partly that's because Guiu, who was on loan, has been recalled to Chelsea following the Liam Delap injury. So that was kind of forced on them. But they got a lot of the business done early in the window, which I think suggests a team who knew exactly what they were doing. I think there's always a danger for teams who go up in the playoffs that they're almost taken by surprise by it. Well, Sunderland clearly had their plan, and they must have bought 6 players in the first week of a window opening. But the players they brought in, I think there's a good mix of youth and experience, because Sunderland they are still a very young side, but last season they were incredibly young. But they've clearly gone for big physical players. You look at that midfield now, and those 3 are incredibly powerful players. Xhaka maybe is a bit more stamina than power, but Habib Diarra is, he's a great sort of driver forward from midfield, but he can also put tackling. Noah Siddiqui is sort of a good blend of the 2, but you wouldn't fancy running to that midfield 3. They're a real tough prospect. They're scoring a lot of goals from cross balls. They break very well. I think maybe the problem against Burnley when they lost was that they came up against a side who also were trying to play without the ball. The fixture list has been kind. You've got to acknowledge that. They got Palace up next away, which is going to be very, very difficult. And then they got Villa at home, which on present form, you'd say that's another opportunity. So look, there's a long way to go. But if you work on the logic that 10 wins keeps you up, they've got 20% of the wins they need, having played 8% of the games. And that's a very good sign.
Yeah. And Villa will be going into that game having just been beaten by David Moyes' Everton as well, or up in Everton. So that's a potentially winless Villa coming up to Sunderland too. So I'd say you'd enjoy that one, all right. John, before we leave, as Jonathan says, United City next, 9th place United against 13th place Man City. After that game, will United still be ahead of Pep Guardiola's City?
Well, you're back to something like 1989, aren't you, with those positions in the league? The thing is with Manchester City is, and Jonathan and I have talked about this at length, is what Manchester City are we seeing here? We don't. They're just so hard to, Rangers after the first game, the new Kevin De Bruyne. After 2 more games, maybe not. There's so many players that I have to say this, and I may end up looking a fool. Don't look Pep Guardiola quality players. Kusanov, the defender, had a bit of a nightmare against Brighton. We've seen him have nightmares before. So it's basically which team is going to have the greater nightmare. United have, oddly, a sort of reasonably not the worst record against City. Last season, when Amorim was in charge, they won with Jonathan's hero, Amad Diallo, scoring an unbelievable winner. It was at that point, wasn't it, when City started to creak? And really, the creaking hasn't stopped since. There was that run in the spring where they came back and got themselves into a Champions League position, but they had a very unconvincing in the FA Cup final. They had that unconvincing summer losing to the was it Al Sad or did it
Al Hilal.
Al Hilal? Sorry, my apologies. Al Hilal losing to a team out in America, and this start of the season has been very un-Pep-like. I mean, we've not seen him really in this position before. And I keep saying this, if he comes back from this and wins the league with this group of players, then he is the greatest of all time. But I don't really see signs of that team. And Donnarumma, as we mentioned at the start of this conversation, that looks like something of a panic buy. The other thing is, I don't understand what was so bad about Edison. What had gone wrong there? And maybe the part of the Pep problem is that a lot of players get jettisoned maybe ahead of the time, the ruthlessness. It's interesting. I mean, I was watching Jack Grealish at the weekend. Unbelievable. Brilliant to watch. So exciting, thrilling. And how can you say a player that's won everything in the game at Manchester City is now enjoying his football when he's not at Manchester City? It's the quandary of Pep Guardiola, isn't it? Is it actually that fun to play for Pep Guardiola? It probably is when you're winning, that moment of victory, when you're all together and you sense it. But inside, there's the difficulty of living up to those disciplines. And when Jack Grealish is allowed to be Jack Grealish, he's loving life. He's also taken a few lessons for playing for Pep Guardiola. You can see his game intelligence is different to what it was at Aston Villa. But it was a pleasure to watch. It was delighted to watch him. And again, he's such a man of the people. He's celebrating with the fans. He's enjoying himself in a way that at Manchester City, that type of thing was sort of frowned on a bit. And he's the people's champion, isn't he? At the People's Club. So that's it. Pep Guardiola, a brilliant manager. We know that. But there is a downside to the utter seriousness and the zeal with which he attacks the game, I'd say.
John Brewin, Jonathan Wilson, thank you very much. 2 £130 million journalists in my eyes.
Thank you, Conan. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Wow.